Well, glory to Jesus Christ, and welcome back to the podcast. Today's guest is Karla. In this episode, we've got a really incredible story to share with you all as Karla details how she became deeply involved in the occult as a powerful witch. I think you'll find her story fascinating, especially how she got into the occult. This is something that really blew my mind. You'll also hear her expose channeling, the New Age, witchcraft, and so much more. But make sure you stick around until the end to hear the series of events that led Karla to Jesus, who changed her life forever. So thank you for listening and enjoy the podcast. Well, Carla, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show today, being willing to share your testimony. I've really been looking forward to having a discussion with you. I've been watching some of your videos. And the first question that I always like to ask everybody, just because it kind of sets the stage a little bit, is could you tell me a little bit about your early life? Did you grow up in a Christian home, or is that not your story?
So, well, it depends on who you ask because I grew up in organized religion. I will say it like that. They do consider themselves Christian. So, I guess um in that aspect, yes, but in did I grow up like a follower of Jesus Christ? No. Um the organized religious group that I grew up in is Jehovah Witness. So I was born into that. I am third generation. Um, I left and got out when I was a teenager. And so growing up in that organization, I was not open, like you're not allowed to go to other churches. You're not allowed to listen to gospel music and stuff like that. So my whole entire life, I had never listened to gospel music, except for when Sister Act came out, and then Sister Act 2, I heard those songs. But other than that, like that's something that is you don't do. And so no, I didn't grow up learning about Jesus in that sense. They do believe in Jesus, but it's a distorted view of Jesus. They also like don't believe in certain things. So like I grew up not believing that, people go to heaven and people go to hell. So when I was a teenager and I wanted to leave, the rest of my adult like teenage life into adult life, I spent having there was no repercussions for my actions. Like I didn't care because I wasn't going to hell. There was no such thing as hell. So whatever I wanted to do, I did it. And I didn't have it, I didn't think anything about it because I'm not, I don't have to, I'm not going to have to answer to anyone. So that's pretty much how I grew up. I mean, when I was younger in it, I followed along. When you're born into something, you just do whatever whatever you know. But as I got older, it just seemed like I couldn't really pinpoint what it was, but I just knew something was off. But at the same time as being in this organized religion, I'm not gonna lie, like it is a cult. Multiple times in this religion, starting in like 1916, they have predicted Armageddon and the end of the world. And of course, it never happened. And how I figured it out that it was a cult was there was a docu series that I was watching, and this woman studied cults, and she started breaking down like Scientology, Mormonism, Jehovah Witness, Seventh Day Adventist, Jonestown. It was all these different cults and why. And she said, number one, they use fear tactics, like you have to do this or this happens. Even the simple thing, like when they don't call it this anymore, but when I was growing up, they called it disfellowshipping, where they shun people pretty much. Um, they have hidden things as far as like there have been major scandals that finally came to light, and they don't report things to the police, they handle everything internally. And so there's just a lot of things that have came out, but that was how I found out was a cult. Was I was watching this, and the lady broke it down, and before she spoke on any of the religions or anything, she broke down what makes a cult a cult. So by the time she got to the Jehovah Witness and was talking about them, I was already like, "Oh no. Oh no, they're fitting this one. Oh no." And that's when I was like, "Oh my goodness." And I was like, "That's a cult." So, that was really hard to swallow when I heard that, even though I had been out since I was a teenager and I was almost I was like 38 or somewhere around there when I was listening to this, and, like, it was really hard to swallow because I had thought, like, if I ever have to get God, like, I'm gonna go back there, and become one of them, and so when this happened, it left me, like, immediately, I was just kind of like, "Well, then is any of this even real? Maybe this is all fake to get us just channeling our energy, towards this and not really paying attention to what's really going on in the world." And so it was devastating even though I wasn't in it because now I was very like, "Well, then now what do I do?" Like, if I how do then it's God I knew God was real, but it was like, is religion real? Maybe I just shouldn't do anything, and I just need to be like, "God, I know you." And, and so, yeah, it was pretty that was kind of a crazy moment for me, and then I realized, my family is still in this, and I'm just like, "Oh, no, do I tell them?" And at the time, I remember hearing this loud and clear, and it was just, like, internally, like, "Do not tell them." It wasn't until later that I got saved that the Holy Spirit told me, like, your family has been in this," specifically my parents, like, well, my dad isn't no longer one, but my mom is, and it was like, my mom's been a Jehovah's Witness for 50 years, and he was like, "Do you think you can break the the programming that they continually go through, like, just by telling her this? She's going to be angry, that's not how this is gonna work." And so he started telling me, "You need to pray. You have to pray for your mom, and you have to pray that she has ears to hear and eyes to see, and that there will be a time when she's willing to hear this. You can't just go up to somebody and be like, 'Oh, you're in a cult.' It's not like, it's not gonna go well." And so that's what I started doing, and, I mean, that's what I continue to do. I have never told her. I don't think she's ever I won't say I don't think, somebody maybe that's a Jehovah's Witness might know her and be like, "Do you know your daughter?" But, so far, she's never seen any of this. But, I mean, I'm close to my parents, and I was very fortunate because in that religion, there are people who are very extreme, but my family wasn't one of them. So, like, I, talk to my parents, I hang out with my mom, she's one of my best friends. So, but there are family members that if you don't stay one, they will disown you.
Wow, that's incredible. So it sounds like God providentially orchestrated for you to hear this, and you kind of like there are a lot of red flags that are coming up for you within the JW movement. And so at some stage, you start to get involved in something else, right? You get involved in the occult. Maybe you could
Yeah.
kind of take us through that. Like, how do you go from being a Jehovah's Witness? I found it really interesting, actually, that you said they don't believe in hell, and that kind of opened you up to thinking, well, there's no repercussions for anything that I do. But yeah,
Yeah.
so take us through that. How did you get involved in that?
So on the flip side of being a Jehovah Witness, my great grandmother was a voodoo witch. So that's how I got and I didn't get into I will say like this, the door was opened not by choice, so I didn't ever go to like my great grandmother and say like, "Oh, I want to practice," because she never practiced in front of us. Um I don't think she was practicing like, really any more that I've ever seen by the time she lived with uh, my grandfather's, sister. I never saw her do anything, but we would go over there all the time and visit, and there was a time that I my mother got called over there when I was a kid, so I had to go with her, and this was the day that my aunt went to check on her mother, and she was levitating off the bed, and so she had called my mom because she freaked out, and she couldn't get her mom to wake up, so she's levitating, and we're not talking like, an inch or 2, we're talking midair levitation, and she's dead in a trance, so, like, she's looks like she's asleep, but my aunt can't, like, talk she's calling her name, she's not waking up. So she ends up leaving her levitating, goes and calls my mom, tells my mom. My mom is like, I just remember as a kid, my mom's like, "We gotta go, we gotta go," and then she says my aunt's name, and we gotta go to her house, and I'm like, "Okay." So we get in the car, we get there. My mom tells me, "Sit in this chair and don't move," and I'm like, "What?" And my mom and my aunt go back in the room, and they are in there for I don't know, I was a kid, so it was a long time, like, probably an hour at least or more, and finally, they come out, and my mom just is kinda like, "Let's go." And so we end up leaving, and I didn't know why we were there. It wasn't until I got older that my mom started telling me stories about my great-grandmother, and she was like, "Oh, remember the time that we went over there and you were I told you to sit in the chair?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "That's 'cause Grandma Bertha was levitating." And I'm like, "What?" And she's like, "Yeah, we couldn't get her awake." And then what happened was is they started praying and reading the Bible over her, and finally, she came back down, and then she woke up, and she was staring at them like, "Oh, hi, what are you guys doing here?" Like, she had no idea. And it was like and my mom then she started sharing stories that happened to her. So, like, she one time went to visit my great-grandmother in Texas, and my sister was I have an older sister, and she was only, like, maybe a couple months old, like, maybe at the max 5 months old, and my mom took her with her, and my mom said she was staying at her house in one of her, guest rooms, and in the middle of the night, my mom said the ceiling opened up and this light literally I was like, "What do you mean it opened up?" She's like, "It opened, like, it cracked." And this light came down on my sister, and my mom, it scared her to death. She jumped on top of my sister and just began to pray, and it finally shut. The light went away, the crack went back, the light went away, and she scooped up my sister, who's a baby, and ran out of my great-grandmother's house and refused to ever stay at her house again. So, while all of this is like, I didn't my mom definitely didn't tell me this as a kid, but we were in my family, like, we all knew she, was a witch, but nobody considered the spiritual repercussions of being around this lady. And so and nobody, like, in Jehovah Witnesses, they don't talk about spiritual warfare or something. That's not something they don't even acknowledge that. Like, Satan is kind of like a thing over there, it's like, oh, if, as long as you once you are a Jehovah Witness, like Satan doesn't do can't harm you. Satan's not doing anything to you because we're following. As long as you follow and do the steps, as long as you're going out in service and you're getting, you get baptized and you do all the things that they tell you to do, you're not going to be touched. And so and my family was just kinda like, "Yeah, she's a witch, whatever," we're around her, like, I don't remember how many times my mom was like, "Hug your grandmother," and then I'm thinking now that I know, like, what can happen, I'm like, "Why would you?" The demons that were all coming off of her. I'm like, "Why would you do that?" But, like but it's just, like, things like that, like, you don't like, it wasn't something in my family that anybody thought about, and so I just remember, like, there were times that I would sit at the table with her, and she would make these very weird sounds, like my mom used to try to tell me like, "Oh, she's just eating and she has dentures." The lady didn't have dentures. So then I was like, "She doesn't have dentures." And then my mom's like, "Oh, well, maybe it's the gold trim around her teeth." Because there was this very weird clicking sound that she would do, and it would make me like zone out. Like I would go into a trance and then she would stop and I'd snap out of it, but then I'd be like, what was I doing? Like where was I? It was almost like I would lose track, and so she would do this on multiple occasions for I don't know how long. It was probably like over a year span or so. And then when she finally passed away, like when I was about 9, I think, as soon as she died is when I started having supernatural abilities. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure, and I didn't learn this until way later into studying things about witchcraft and stuff. Is one of the things is like when it's generational and you have done like you in order to get certain heights of power, you really have to give yourself over. And that's going to be giving yourself over to whatever demon, Satan, making that, I'm here for life. I want these powers. But then what he does is he comes for your people in your family. So you have to pass this on. They want you to pass before you die to pass it on. So I believe what that lady was doing was imparting whatever demons, spirits, and everything. She was doing that to me as a child because the moment that she died, is when I started having like crazy abilities. So I would have like premonitions, dreams, visions, but I also could talk to people. I could, this is going to sound nuts. I could get into people's minds and talk to them. And, I did this on multiple multiple occasions. But the first time it happened, it was to my cousin who was not from that side of the family. She was on my dad's side. We were going to visit, and my dad came in and he said, "Oh, get dressed, like, we're gonna go down to Salem." I lived in, Portland, Oregon. That's where I was born and raised. And so there's Salem, Oregon, it's the capital. And so they're like, "We're going down to our families." And so I'm like, "Okay, cool." And I just remember I was in my room and I don't remember what I did, but I remember I went straight into her head and I said, "We're coming to see you." And I said, "What are you wearing today?" And she told me. And then I literally matched my clothes. And when we got down there, we were like the very thing that had telepathically came to me was exactly what she was wearing. And we were matching because I had matched my outfit to her. Yeah, I don't think she knew that I could do it or that she was aware. But, late years we're talking years and years later when I was in the new age, I had a boyfriend that was cool with it because like, his grandmother who was like his mom because she raised him, was like a psychic. And so he was really cool with the stuff that I was doing. But, when I was practicing in the new age, these all these abilities came back, but they and then I even got more. And so I started doing it to him, but this time I was well aware. So I would literally implant the thought into his mind to do something, and then he would do it. Or I would make him say stuff and he would say it. And so I realized I was like, this is cool. And I did this for a long time, probably months and months, until one day, um, I did it and he turns up and looks at me and he says, "You were just in my head." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "You're in my head." He said, "I felt you in my head." And he's like, "I know you were in my head. Literally felt you like implant the thought." And I was like, "Oh, that's crazy." And I kinda, like, played it off. I was like, "No." And that's when I was like, "Oh, goodness, like, this is super cool." But then, I didn't do that to him again because he was well aware, but that was one of the things, that I did as a kid. I didn't really it wasn't like I was honing these skills. Like, I had them, but then because of my other side being in a Jehovah Witness and everything, it wasn't like I could tell my parents. It wasn't like I could talk about it. So I just kind of, like, kept them quiet, but then, like, when I became a teenager, the premonitions and dreams were pretty strong, and so, like, I would tell my friends, like, "Don't go here, this and this is gonna happen," like, and I would warn them of things, and then it would happen, and they'd be like, "How did you know?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know." So I never really told anyone, but it was something that I've had my whole life I was doing it, but then, like, once I got, um once I got into witchcraft, which it didn't happen until I was around, like, 22, I wasn't really operating in those type of powers that I had been given. I was now casting actual spells and that type of stuff. So I went into it like, um it was a power thing. It was about control, and, that's really why I liked it. Like, the first time I ever cast a spell was because I wanted to see if it would work, but once I realized it worked, it became a control thing. And so it was about you can manipulate things, and you can control your circumstances, and you can control what happens, and so that's really how I got sucked in.
Yeah,
And the
that's
minute
incredible. It's incredible to me
Yeah,
that it all started when your grandmother passed away. Like, then you felt these
yeah.
powers come to you. That's remarkable.
Yeah, that's the lot like, that's when I remember being I before then, I never remember, being able to do that, but I will say this, I believe that, like, I've always had a very, strong spirit like, not spirit, strong ability to discern, because when I was a kid, I remember, like, I would feel danger before it would even happen. Like, there was an incident when I was a kid where we had these neighbors that lived next to us, and I remember I was outside, I was probably maybe, like, only 4 years old, and I was playing in my yard, and I was playing with the ball, and the ball rolled, and the person who lived there, it was this guy, and I just immediately knew that this was bad, like, he was dark, and he was trying to lure me into over to him, and I was like, "Oh, heck no," and as a kid, he got up and he tried to grab my arm, but before he could do it, I already knew danger, and I just took off running in my house, and that happened, like, a couple times where I was put in a dangerous situation, and then it was like, I could discern immediately, like, this person's bad, there's something dark on them, and to run. So and the thing is like, I also wanna say is, like, these gifts that I had, even though I thought that they were coming from my great-grandmother, they were never hers, and they never came from her. I had You get gifts and abilities from God, and what happens is that the devil, when he knows, he will hijack them in any way possible. So the very things that, like, I was able to do, besides getting in people's heads, that was straight demonic, but, like, a lot of the things that I was able to do, I still am able to do now, they're just different. Pretty much how I talk to him. So, like, I talk to him on a daily basis. He usually talks to me on a daily basis. But that's kind of how the gifts like went from being hijacked by Satan and then being brought into like God's kingdom. And then like I started in the last it's probably been about 6, 7 months is when he started giving me back like really very vivid dreams and also, like, I will have visions, but they're, like, while I'm awake. Like, I'm not sleeping, I'll just see the vision, like, boom, like a picture within my like, but it's clear as day as if I'm looking at it on the outside, like, it's hard to explain. But, and then started, like, the being able to do, like, the prophetic messages and stuff like that. But that's pretty much like what it is that like Satan knows that like people have these gifts and so he immediately attacks and tries to make sure that they never know what these gifts truly are for.
That yeah, that's incredible. And I want to circle back to your life now. But just for the listeners, I want to get an idea kind of how your story unfolds for you, right? Because there seems to be like this timeline that we're following where your grandmother dies, you begin to become involved in the occult yourself because you kind of inherit her gifts. And then you start to get interested in witchcraft, you start to perform spells, you gain some level of control. What happens next? So, like, what are you hoping to achieve when you're channeling spirits? When you're doing this kind of work? Obviously, you don't think that they're demons. Are you doing this as like a profession? Are you, like, yeah, take us through that period of your life.
Okay, so initially when I was in witchcraft and casting spells and all of that, it was for my own personal thing. So I was more like about controlling things or getting things. It was more personal gain. I did not help other people or anything. I didn't like sell my spells or anything like that. Um, but then when I after the 18 years of witchcraft, I decided that I started getting into the new age. And so when I jumped into the new age, that became different. So that was more about healing and helping people. So when I jumped in, I was like, I trained up and became a Reiki healer. And I, was all about trying to balance people's chakras. And I was just, that was what it was under. It came to me under like self help, self empowerment, but also how to help and heal people and how to get people to heal from traumas and issues and all of this and I jumped in head first. Like, I mean, the new age is so like never ending. There's so many different rabbit holes you can go down. And so I would just go down one after another. And I picked up a lot of different things. Like I was, doing crystals but then I realized that like I started divination with pendulums. And this is when this is really when I realized about the getting into someone's head was because I would practice with a pendulum and I would in with my mind I would control the pendulum. So I would make it perfectly still and then I would control it with my mind and I would tell it how to move and then I would have it start spinning and then I would tell it to stop and go counterclockwise or back and forth. And I once I got really good at this where it was all like in my mind, I'm not talking, I'm just doing this in my head. I started practicing on people because I was like, if I can do this with a pendulum, I'm pretty sure I can do this with a person. And so that's kind of really where that initial doing this on my cousin, this was now like, oh, I'm gonna use this. And so then it was like, let me find a guinea pig, which was my boyfriend at the time. And then it was like, let me see how far this goes. Like, is it just implanting thoughts? Can I make them do stuff? Can I make them say things? That type of thing. And so, yeah. And then just the new age it goes deep. And I just was doing like all, I would go to different like these group kind of meeting type things where like all these people with powers would get together and so it was like I was going to these things and I was training under this lady who was like a psychic medium and I would go to her stuff and then there's another person who does this who you train with and so I was just go jumping around to all this stuff and the reason why is because when I first before I really jumped fully into new age, I had went to a metaphysical fair. I didn't even know what a metaphysical fair was, but I don't remember how I saw this flyer either, but got the flyer. I remember me and my boyfriend at the time, who I was doing all this stuff to, we went. And I sat down with a shaman. I sat down with all these different people who practice, different stuff. And I sat down with this girl who was a tarot reader, and she was a horrible tarot reader. Like it was like she wasn't good and she wasn't getting anything right. And so then I thought, "Oh, this is just fake. I'm done." And so right at that moment, there was a gentleman next to her who was a psychic medium, and for some reason, I was like, "You know what? Let me see if he knows something." And a minute that I sat down, he just started talking to me, and he was telling me stuff that I knew, like, there's no way that he would know. And so he kept telling me all kinds of stuff, and then at the end of this uh session, he looks at me and he said, "You and your youngest son are open channels." And I said, "What the heck does that mean?" And he says, "You have multiple abilities." And he goes, "You need to study and hone your gifts." And I was like, "What are you talking about? What gifts?" And he's like, "You're clairaudient, you're clairvoyant." And he just started rattling off all this stuff. And of course, it's filling the balloon of pride inside of you, like, I'm special. And so I'm just like, whoa. And he's like, literally, he's telling me how powerful I am and everything. And so I'm just like, "Woo!" And so that's how I bought it hook, line, and sinker, and the next thing I know, I'm just jumping down rabbit holes and picking up different things and trying to study all these practices and get more power and how to ascend and get to the next dimension, and when I look back now, it sounds ridiculous, but I mean, at the time when you're in this stuff, like, it doesn't sound far-fetched, and it sounds like, "Okay, and they have a lot of ways of twisting things to make it seem like, "Oh, this is legit."
How
So
do
that
people try and ascend? Like, what does that look like in the New Age movement? Like, because in Christianity, we read our Bible, we pray, we spend time with the Lord. What are people in the New Age doing to try to get that next level of spirituality?
there's a lot of different ways. There's multiple routes, but, a lot of times it's like balancing it's opening up your chakras, opening up your 3rd eye, um, doing you're trying to get on a you're trying to gain more knowledge to get on the next spiritual level, so some people are doing certain yoga and things like that, getting into like stronger, deeper meditation practices where now you're completely meditating for hours on end with nothing in your mind. And it can be a lot of different ways. People are trying to do it through people are wanting like they do the kundalini and trying to open up that whole route with the serpents coming up, the traveling up of the the spine from the base. I tried doing that, by and I didn't do it through, like, yoga or anything like that. I did it from frequencies. And that was thank thank God, I did not get all the way through, because even when I initially started, there was a point that, I had been listening to these frequencies and doing all the other stuff I do, and I remember, once I had opened that door, I started having, I would be at work and I would hear, like, thousands of, like, nonstop chattering voices in my head, and they weren't saying anything. It was like 1,000 people talking at once, just but nothing that you could make out, and it would happen to me to where I couldn't function, and so I remember looking it up on my computer, like, why is this happening? I'm having these weird symptoms. And, in the new age, they're like, oh, that's because you're ascending and your vibration is, off and you have to, your vibrational whatever is off and you need to like reset it, go ground yourself in some dirt outside. And I'm like, it's not gonna stop the voices. And it was just, but I'm reading this and I'm like, okay, so I'm on to something. Good. So I kept doing it, but then it got to the point it was so bad and I started to see weird stuff like in when I'm wide awake, like these weird it was bad. And I was like, forget this. I was like, you know what? I'll try a different way. I will try to ascend in a whole nother way because this is not working. And I stopped. And it was interesting because the moment that I stopped the frequencies and all of that, the voices stopped. And so I was like, "Yep, not going down that route." But I mean, I was opening up doors. So, not only the channeling, the automatic writing, I had an entity had told me that I was Isis reincarnated. So one night, Horus appeared at the foot of my bed, like in full Egyptian gear. Yeah, he didn't say anything either. And I'm a very for all of the witchcraft and stuff that I did, like I am a very scary person. So like I've never watched horror films, didn't play with a Ouija board. There were certain things that I never crossed. And so seeing like this apparition in my room, I just thought to myself, like, okay, I'm gonna pretend that I'm asleep. And maybe like if I sit perfectly still and I'm laying here and I just like kind of close my eyes, like maybe he'll just go away. And so for eventually it just left. But then like, I was still messing with frequencies, and so I was just on to different ones, and so now I was listening to astral projection frequencies, and then one night, boom, astral projected. So that was interesting. Um, yeah, just remember, like, I was looking well, I didn't realize that I was looking over, like, onto my bed, so I'm up above my bed, and I'm looking down, and I see my boyfriend, and then I see a girl in my bed, and I'm like, "Who's this girl?" Like, "Oh, and and then as I'm looking at her, I lean closer, and I realize it's my body. That's me in the bed, and as soon as I reckon like, that connection happened, I just remember slamming so hard into my body to where I shot up off the bed and was, like, sucking in air. And then I turned to him and I just started hitting him like this, and I'm like, "Dude, I was astral projected. I was out of my body." But the pain of it was so it hurt really, really bad to the point where I was like, "I think I'm cool." So I didn't really try that anymore. And then I actually spoke with someone who used to do it all the time, and I was explaining what happened to me. They're like, "Oh yeah, I remember that," and I'm like, it's an off. It hurts, but I mean, how bad it's witchcraft and new age is kind of one of those things like, how bad do you want it? And people will continue to do it until they just, they don't care anymore because they want the power. But for me, it was just, nope, I'll do something else. And so I just kept, that's what I would do. If I didn't like something, I'd go find something else to do. And so that's what I did. Like I just um but I was really, into like trying to help people. So that was kind of what was behind my getting into the new age was, oh, I want to help people. And so I kind of was, but not really because all I was doing is just opening up doors in their life. Um And then so, but basically as I was going down that road, um, it was really weird because, like, I liked it because what's crazy is that I did become a better version of myself, and so that's kind of what is tricky about it because I did become a better version of myself. I learned how to, be more, like, nice to people, and I practiced gratitude and was grateful for the things that I had, and, I stopped reacting to things. Like, I used to be pretty short-tempered and would, like, go off on somebody, cuss you out in a hot minute, and when I started getting into the new age, I always had this mentality that, like, you cannot control other people, but you can control your own reactions. And so I stopped being like that. I would stop allowing people to trigger me, and I would learn to just kind of be like, yep, that's too bad. And so it taught me to be a better person. It taught me to be calmer and more patient. And I do believe that, like, there's always a reason for everything that we go through, and so I believe, God was allowing me to go down this route, because in the end, it would be something that I would be able to help people get out of.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I like that you mentioned that there were so many areas for you that actually it got scary at certain points because I think a lot of people have this rose tinted view of the new age movement, but it really is dangerous. And these spirits, these entities that you're interacting with, really are, like you say, opening doors. They're trying to lead you astray. And one of the things that I hear repeatedly from guests on the show is that it's like a hamster wheel. It's like you keep trying new things. You're looking for healing. You're looking for something that's good, but it fixes something for a little while, and there is some benefit, but it just keeps drawing you in deeper and deeper, and you're actually not going anywhere. And so that kind of brings us to this point in your testimony where what even like how do you even begin to explore Christianity? You know, you've come from basically Jehovah's Witnesses. Your grandmother was practicing voodoo, like, it's this incredible background. How do you even begin to think about, Christianity and the Christian message?
So to be honest, I didn't. That's not really that wasn't the first thing that happened. What happened was the video that came across my YouTube about cults, which then led me to realize that the religion that I grew up in was a cult. So then that kind of got me scared because I was like, okay, now what? And then I was kind of like, well, what if all of this is fake? What if religion's fake? And so um but then that kind of kept me open because I was like, "Well, something has to be real or maybe it's not, I don't know." But then what happened was I had went down the rabbit hole of aliens, and I'd gotten into the alien side of the new age, and, that's just that's a whole side in itself. And I was not, like, "Oh, I'm gonna go try chat with the aliens," or anything like that. I was more like I believed they were real. I did not believe that they were here to help us or anything. I was just very curious, like, okay, if these beings are showing up and stuff, like, what are they here for? Like, why do they keep appearing? Why are they, like, around? And so I was, watching all these different docu-series and all of this, um, and then on my YouTube, and what was very strange and what I always say is God will use whatever he wants to pull someone in, and he literally used YouTube with me because on my YouTube, all I had was secular music and frequencies, but somehow these random things would pop up. And so this one video popped up and I can't remember who it is, if it was like L.A. Marzulli or what, or like Rob Sidka or something, but it was this docu-series they did one of them had done, and it was about aliens, and they, were talking about how, like, they had interviewed, like, 2 or 300 people who had been abducted or had, some type of contact, and they were talking to them about, "How did you get out of it?" and this and that, and these people were saying when I said the name Jesus, and I'm like, "Wait, Jesus? Like, what does Jesus have to do with anything? Like, why would they say Jesus?" And that, like, right there, like, just I was stuck, like, "Oh, Jesus." And then he kept talking and, he and at the end of this part, he said, "Has it ever dawned on you that the aliens are demons?" And as soon as mind you, I'm at work working, as soon as I hear this in my whole entire inner being, I knew it was the truth, and I was like, "Oh, no. They're demons?" And I was like, I don't want no part of this, no part of this at all. And then he says, and at the end he goes, Satan hates you so much that he doesn't care how he gets you, whether you die in a car accident, a drug overdose, cancer, whatever. He said he just cares that you die and you never know the truth, that to get out of this you need Jesus. And I was like, here's the thing. I didn't go like, "Oh, I need Jesus." I was like, "Wait, he hates me. Why? I never did anything to this to Satan." And I got really upset. And so then I decided, you know what? If you hate me so much, I'm going to study you and why you hate me and how you're trying to kill me. So I started going down these rabbit holes of like studying into like principalities, what they were over, what did they do? And what it did is it convinced me how real Satan is. It convinced me that hell was real. And as soon as all of that clicked in my head, I said, I said, then what's the end game? And that's when Jesus was like, she's ready. So then, and it's still after that, what happens is next, a different video. This time it's a pastor. It's a video from a pastor. And I curiosity killed the cat again because I've never listened to a sermon in my life. So I clicked on it and I just started listening, and then the next sermon, and the next sermon, and I started listening to these sermons on a regular basis. Mind you, I'm still doing my thing. I'm still practicing, but now I'm like listening to these sermons like, huh, okay. And it was one pastor who has 300 and like, I think it's like 90 videos, sermons. They're straight across sermons that he did in church. And I just that was the only one that ever popped up. The only preacher that would ever pop up on my YouTube was him. And it was always something else. Every time I thought of something like, well, what about this? Boom. The sermon he would be speaking on would cover the question. And I just kept listening to these. And eventually he preached on, well, he does like a couple sermons on witchcraft and deliverance and all different kinds of things. I mean, he was preaching on like the award shows and things in Hollywood and how they are rituals and all this long before this stuff was and like as popular as it is now. And so it got to the point where he preached this one message and he told his own testimony in the message. And he spoke on how he was like in his 20s, he was one of the biggest drug dealers in his state in Kentucky in the United States where in his town where he lived. And he was God had been calling him to come to preach, and he was running from it. And he said he was in a bar one night, sitting at the bar drunk as could be, and he heard the Holy Spirit call him and say, get up and leave. And this time he ended up listening. And so he got up and he said the minute that he stepped outside, he sobered up. And he said he knew he was changed. He didn't know what had changed or how, but he knew from that moment something was different. And that stuck with me. And I thought, I wonder if I could see if this is real. And I guess it was one of those things like, okay, I thought I always, believed in God because I was like, I know you're not going to, I never was like a person who would believe, evolution or any of that. I'm like, you're not going to convince me I came from a mud puddle, an amoeba, or whatever the heck is nonsense you teach. I'm like, I didn't come from a lizard. Like, that doesn't even make sense. But God was so far, far away. And so I just remember like coming home one night and I was still practicing. So I went through my normal stuff that I ever did and I remember smoking, I remember having a couple drinks and like around like it got to be like midnight and I don't know there I don't remember like why the thought would even be to do this, but I was like, I'm just sick of this. I'm just sick of everything. And so I thought, I'm going to go see if this is real. Like, I'm going to go talk to God or whatever. I don't know what I'm doing. And so I remember I went into my bedroom and it was like, I didn't turn the lights on. It was pitch black dark. I got on my floor on my knees and I just started talking to God. And I didn't even have a conversation. I literally just said, I just said, "You know what? If you heal me, if you take everything from me, all of it," and I said, "I'm not going to counseling. I'm not definitely ain't getting to put on no medication. So you're gonna," and I never was, but I'm like, I don't know what this healing is gonna involve, but the type of healing that I want, I'm like, I want to be healed to the point where I didn't have to, I can't even say that I did something to get healed. And I'm like, break everything off of me. And I said, in return, I will never walk away from you, and I will never turn my back on you if you do this. And as soon as those words came out, like, I just remember I started crying, and I just was telling him, like, I'm just tired of this. Like, I want a better life. And then there was this very weird, like, guttural sound that came out of me, and then, like, everything stopped. I stopped crying, everything, and then I just was like, in the new age, you're always waiting for some sign, that it's working or whatever, so I just kinda waited, and I was like, well, thinking, like, I don't know, maybe a dove was gonna come out of somewhere or something, but nothing happened, and then I just was like, "Okay, I'm just gonna go to bed." And I went to bed, and, the next day, like, I didn't change my habits, I didn't try to change anything. I knew, like, from just God, I knew that, like, he was going to do everything in his time, and that and I knew not to get in his way, I knew not to try to change something, I knew that to just be ready for when he told me it was time, then that was the time. And so that's what I did, like, I continued my day to day and everything, but then in the background, he's changing things to the point where, like, the first thing that went left me was one day somebody at my job was like, do you know you stopped cussing?" That was the first thing that somebody said to me, and I was like, "What?" And because I used to cuss like a sailor. I mean, woo, it was bad. And they said, "You stopped cussing, like, I haven't heard you say a cuss word." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And they're like, "You need to pay attention, like, you don't cuss anymore." And I thought that was so weird. I'm like, "Okay, whatever." But that was the first thing that he was taking. And then the one thing that he did that night was when I was 14, I was sexually assaulted by a student, like a classmate, and that door opened up everything into my life. And so that night when I was um making my first covenant with God and a pact with him, that healing that I was asking for was from that. And so that night, I believe that that guttural release was that, the trauma being removed off of me, because the trauma was the stronghold to everything. And so that being removed then started the other breaking off of the other strongholds that had came in behind that trauma. And so just, I never stopped, like, I never had been like, "Okay, I'm gonna stop drinking." I never was like, "I'm gonna stop doing this." Um, I ended up, realizing that I needed to do a deliverance, and so I did. I did a deliverance, but then I didn't realize that when you do a deliverance, like, um you have to fill yourself with stuff, so you need to read God's word, you need to be praying, you need to be, worshiping, you need to do all those things. I just did the deliverance and was like, I feel great. Well, then, like, weeks later, exactly as the Bible states, when you sweep your house clean, they will come back. And it is more than seven. It's more than that. Like, it was a ton of them. And chaos just broke out. And I was like, oh no. And I remember just saying to myself in my head, like, what did I do wrong? And in that very moment, here comes another sermon. Here comes this preacher, and he's talking about how you need to be pulling in the word of God and listening and praying and sitting with God. And I'm like, oh, that's where I messed up. And so I ended up doing the deliverance again. And then this is what I started doing. And then even after doing the deliverance, like, I had stopped drinking. But then what happened is that my youngest son, his I had this huge incident with his dad, and um, it ended up, like, the police were called and all this stuff, and we weren't together or something. It's a long, crazy story, but, like, he wouldn't leave my house, and so I ended up the police had to be called, and he was, like, literally stressing me out to the point that I was just like, "I can't take this anymore," and I remember leaving my house, and I started walking, and I was walking and, like, in the same, path as we there was a liquor store, like, 2 blocks away from my house, and I ended up going into the liquor store, and I bought this bottle, but I didn't drink it when I got home. But then, like, after the police had to be called and all this stuff happened, and even the police officer was like, "I would suggest you probably not stay at your house. Like, you never know." And so he was like, "I think you should stay away from your house for a couple days." And by then, like, my parents were there, so my mom's like, "Yeah, just grab your guys' bags and come to our house." And so it was after all of this that I was like, and I grabbed this bottle. It was like a little bottle, but I grabbed it and I took it with me. And I just remember getting to my parents' house and I just opened the bottle and I was like, I'm drinking this. Like, I was so just frazzled and stressed out. And I was like, I'm drinking this. And so I tipped the bottle to my mouth, and right before I, like, drank it, I heard as clear as day, it was, like, booming, and it was not outside, it was, like, internally, but it was so loud, it was just internally vibrating in my body, and it said, "This will be the last drink you ever drink." And I said, "Okay," and I drank it. The bottle. I woke up the next day and never drank again. And then, like, so God does things in his own time, and, like, if you are willing, it's about being open and willing to surrender, and it wasn't so much I had to do stuff, I have to change, I have to stop the addiction, or I have to do it's about he's going to do it, so you have to get out of his way. And so what he really did that night, like, after when I woke up the next day, like, I mean, he made it to the point as if I had never drank before. So it wasn't like, somebody who goes to recovery and then, you have to go to meetings and there's times when you struggle. No. I mean, the next day, like, it didn't matter what happened to me, whatever chaos happened in my life, I did not remember to ever pick up a drink. It was like I had never done that before. So, like, I just knew how to go to God and deal with it. And so I would just be like, "This happened. What am I supposed to do?" And then wait. And he would, whatever, it would be some sign, something that he would show me. And I'd be like, "Okay, I do this." And so the next thing was breaking off the habit of smoking weed. And so I I remember there was like we'd gotten paid and I had went to this actual like dispensary and got like a whole bunch. And I remember I was like, you know what? I need to get I just had this overwhelming feeling like you need to get baptized. And I was like thinking about it and pondering it. And I was like, you know what? Like I knew exactly what it represented without anyone telling me. And I was like, I'm gonna die to my old self. Like when I get baptized, the old Karla is dead. And I was like, I don't ever want to come out of that water and do the same habits. So I was like, I just made another pact with God. I was like, okay, I'm gonna sign up to get baptized. I was like, I am not going to be the same person when I get out of that water. But I bought all this weed. So what I'm gonna do is smoke it all before I get baptized. And I was like, and I swear after that, it's a wrap. And, he probably could have been like, no, or whatever, but he didn't say anything. And so I did. And then I got like, it was like a month or so away before they had another baptism. And so I literally didn't buy more, didn't do any, like I had made this agreement with him. And so I was sticking to my side and I was hoping like this is what I need you to do for me. I don't want to come out of that water with any habit. And so I made sure that, before I got baptized, everything was gone. I threw everything away. Everything I had. By then I had been clearing out my house of, everything. And I think the only last things I had was I used to have crystals going all the way around the ceiling of my walls, the door jams and stuff. And those were the last to go because I was like, oh, it's so maybe, but then he was like, "Get rid of them." And so I took all of that was the last, and I threw it in the garbage, and then I ended up getting baptized. When I came out of that water, that was it. Like, that was gone. And so, yeah, that was it. That was kinda like all of that was kind of left behind, and I literally came out of the water and knew, like, that girl is dead, and there's a different person here, and it wasn't really hard, I just allowed God to pretty much do, whatever, and I just was along for the ride.
I love it. I love it. And I love that you covered that it was a bit of a process for you because it is like that for a lot of people. And I think when people become new Christians and sometimes when they listen to testimonies and everything ends the second somebody becomes a Christian, they think like, what's going on here? But sometimes it is really a process. Coming to Christ, repentance is definitely a process. And so I love that you shared your testimony. Thank you for sharing so vulnerably. As we begin to close, I always like to remind people that if you're listening to this and you're in a position similar to the one that Carla was in, maybe you're practicing witchcraft, you're in the occult, you have, generational issues, trauma, whatever it is, come to Jesus. Jesus Christ is alive. He really lived, he really died on that cross, and he rose again. And he took the punishment for your sin if you will repent and place your faith in him. And he wants to know you. So come to Jesus. That's one of the messages that I always like to end on as we come towards the end of the podcast. But Carla, I know people have really enjoyed listening to your story and getting to know you a little bit. So where can people find more of your stuff? I think some of my audience will particularly like your podcast that we were talking about before we started recording. I'll link it all in the description box below. But yeah, tell us a little bit about the ministry that you're involved with now, and before we close, so people can find you.
Yeah, so people can find me just going to carlacallanministries.com. My social media, everything is under it's all carlacallanministries.com. So if you just type that into YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, threads, you're gonna pop up and see my picture. Um, and if you go on to my website, you'll be able to see that where my podcasts are actually at. There's actually buttons that you can click on that'll connect you directly to the podcast. Also Deliverance Diaries, that's the podcast that I um that is from my own personal experience. And then also I started collecting other testimonies and allowing people to share their story and that one, now is also on YouTube. So there's a whole Deliverance Diaries YouTube channel. So yeah, if you go to my website, that's pretty much how you can connect with me and get into the and see what I'm up to. I do one-on-one discipleship with people. And so it looks different for every single person, what we work on and what we do, but I'm very hands on. And people are, one thing that's kind of funny is people are really surprised when they send me an email or something and I respond back and I'm like, hey, do you have time for a phone call? And they're like, I can't believe you were like actually talking. And I'm like, oh yeah, I said, it doesn't matter what I ever do in my life. The first thing I'm never going to do is I will never have like, someone calling for me or anything. I'm like, that's like one of my first things that I made a promise with God was that when I did this journey, it was very lonely and I had no one there. Had no one to share the good times and I had no one to go through the hard times with but God. And so I made a pact with God and I told him, if you use me how you see fit, I said, I want to be a person that walks with people through their journeys so they never have to experience what I did. And so that's what he's allowed me to do. And so I'm just holding up my side of the bargain by making sure that, yeah, if you reach out to me and you need prayer, you're probably going to get a message from me and me asking, is there specific, things that I should be praying for you? A lot of times you're going to get a written prayer sent back to you that is all for whatever you need prayer for. If you're needing to ask questions, then you're most likely going to end up on a video call or like some type of phone call with me where we're gonna sit and talk. And I'm a person. Like there's nothing special about me. So, I love talking to people. I love hearing people's stories. So yeah, that's pretty much where you can reach me. You can on social media, on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook every day. I do morning devotionals that go out Monday through Friday. So yeah, you'll pretty much see me around and definitely, um, Definitely check out Deliverance Diaries. There are some really cool people that I have been given the chance to meet with some amazing stories of just how amazing Jesus truly is. So,
Amen. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Carla, again for coming on for sharing your story. Guys, if you're still listening and you made it this far, I assume you found some kind of value in the video. Would you consider liking, subscribing, sharing, leaving a rating if you're listening to this on Spotify? It just helps get the show out to far more people and it helps get the gospel out to more people. And yeah, that's what we're all about on this channel. So thanks again, Carla, for coming on. And yeah, check out Carla's links and her social media. And yeah, you and I will talk a little bit more after I end the official part of this discussion. But yeah, thank you so much for your time.
thank you.